And I think we're live, Aaron.
Are we live finally?
I think we are. Welcome,
After
everyone.
all these weeks, it seems. Hey guys, how you doing? Can you guys see us? Can you hear us?
Are we all
Langston
here,
said
ready to
still in the
go?
meeting. We're done with the meeting.
Aaron's still got a home because he's had earthquakes again. I know
Oh my
last week,
gosh.
yeah, you had some more earthquakes, Aaron, I believe.
So many, 5.6, 5.4, 5.1, and of course, since these started in December, every day we have 3 point and 2 points. So, but the last ones were pretty bad. So bad that I just noticed in our bathroom we have like this kitchen bathroom sink cabinet thing that's really heavy, has a marble top on it, and I just went in there the other day and it was all crooked and pushed out, which you really have to give your might to do it, so it's not like accidental. So man, it just rattled that thing out of place. It's pretty crazy. How about you? You're back in stuck in home, right?
No, well, I'm not. I'm lucky. I am about 4 miles outside the zone, so I'm allowed to do. So I'm not in lockdown, but everyone in Melbourne is. So I think it's 5 million people are gone back to lockdown for 6 weeks again. So it's terrible. I mean, look, the thing is, put it in perspective, they only had, I shouldn't say only, but they had 190 cases yesterday, which I suppose if you look at the US, that's nothing when you're dealing with, what are they getting, thousands and thousands. We had 190, but I think they want to put a lid on it before it takes off again, because we really had no cases at all. But I think the thing is we're back into winter here, see, so it's probably the second it goes cold again, it starts to take off again. So that's not a good sign for the US and Europe once you're over the warm weather. So I think they want to go back down for 6 weeks, try and get it back under control. And then, like I said, I'm lucky though. I'm just outside that border, so I'm not in lockdown. So I'm free to go wherever I like and do whatever I want to do. So I'm very lucky. Like I said, just for the, like I said, a few kilometres or a couple of miles, I've just beat it. I'm classified as regional, so I'm not classified as a metropolitan. So it's lucky I'm just outside of that. So yeah,
very lucky.
Yeah, so let's see who's in here. We've got Dana is here. Dana came in early. He said just got a thumbs up in before someone gave you a thumbs down. I don't know whether we've got it yet or not. I love it.
Oh, let me check. Everybody give this thumb. Oh, we've got 13 thumbs up.
Whoa. William said, hi, David. I'll wait to catch up you live. Love your show, Billy. Billy's the person that always shows those amazing portrait photos from Scotland, Aaron, in our photography videography school.
Amazing work. He's here?
Yeah.
Good job,
Dana
Billy.
Also said, how many thumbs up can David Oster get before the show starts? Langston's here. He's in a meeting, though. He said, will my meeting end before the show starts? Laugh out loud. He's been very busy.
I saw him saying he's still in the meeting. That's what right when we got on, he was still in the meeting. Gilbert, how you doing, buddy? Glad you're here.
Jim
Van
is here as well. Jim joined
Mike.
the chat. This was really funny. I sent the link to the wrong people. I sent it to a group of friends, and Jim thought I sent it to him, and Jim was logging on to the show. I had to boot him.
It's like, oh my God, Jim's coming on the show. Get rid of him quick. Just kidding, Jim. Oh my gosh.
See, William, Jim said, William, Billy, of your street photos, what about percentage of those people do you know? Look, Bill is amazing. Harmon Billy, his name's William, but he does amazing little shots of portraits of people just in the street, and he's always posting them in our photography videography school, and I love it because it's just sort of life around Scotland, and it's fantastic to actually watch. Gilbert's here as well.
Sizzleman, Barry,
William said, hi, Jim Penn. Street shoots are all strangers. So he said they're all strangers who I stop and ask for a wee photo shoot. So they are strangers. Well, it's fantastic. That's what I like about it, because it just seems to be spontaneous when he's
very cool
working on them. Carl, number one USA. Happy Independence Day for the other day, guys.
I'm going to shut this door real quick,
US
guys.
people. Van also said, wow, great detail. I would too, saving to purchase the 100 to 400. So Van is saving up to buy a new lens. Altrix in also this time for a live show, Aaron. So Altrix said hit the like button. Mike is also here as well. Mike Walters. Altrix just saying hi. Hero said, who's buying that crazy 12 to 24?
Yeah.
Have you seen that this morning? Like, look, I think
Yeah.
if you've got the money, fantastic,
cheap.
Aaron, but it's $3,000. Like,
Yeah,
that's
it's pretty
US.
cheap. I ordered it. I ordered two actually, one for a backup.
Oh my God! Like that'll be $5,000 or $6,000 Australian.
Yeah, that's like crazy, right?
I mean, look, it looks like it's an amazing piece of glass, and I suppose if you're a professional and you use that focal length a lot, well, it's probably worth it. But I think if it was me, I'd probably be buying the Sigma 14 to 24. I know you're not at 12, but it's half the cost. I think that's what I'd be getting. But if you are after the ultimate quality, it looks like it's a great lens, but yeah, very, very expensive. So I certainly won't be buying that. I use wide angle, that sort of length, very, very rarely. I would like a prime wide angle though, Aaron, like around 12 to 14. What's the widest you tend to shoot?
The widest lens I've used for like ever was my gosh, 40 millimeters was my widest for a long time, and then my widest for maybe the last maybe last 5 years was 28, and then a couple times I had a 24 maybe for 2 years, but I'm back with 28, and I hardly use it, but when I do use it, it's just for those specific shots. If you don't know me, it's the low shots, looking up at a model type of thing, which I hardly do. So it's not my widest lens of 50 millimeters. It's probably my most wide lens that I use. Every once in a while, 28.
I noticed that Altric too said it's been so hot there he can't get anyone in front of his new 135. He bought the 135 GM.
Nice.
Langston saying saving to purchase another Blackmagic pocket camera. I don't think the new Sony will be amazing enough. So he's saving to buy another Blackmagic.
Shouldn't you just hold off for a second, or I don't know? But the price difference anyways, right?
Langston, yeah, I know they're very reasonably priced actually at the moment.
Yeah, so it's probably just get it if you like it.
Langston said it's about 100 degrees. I think Aaron lives in permanent 100 degrees.
Yeah, it's so hot. Like right now, it's not super hot. I don't have the air conditioning on. I just have the fan going, so it's okay today. But man, yeah, I can get really hot.
I love, Tim also said that the 12 to 24 looks great, but I'll be happy to get the Sigma at less than half the price. And I think that's probably what most people are going to do. I think, look, unless you need the 2.8, you could also go for the 12 to 24 f4 version, which is way cheaper as well. So there's a lot of other options. I think that's going to be a really limited specialized lens. I can't picture many people spending that sort of money, particularly at the moment. If you're dealing for 3,000 US, is pretty nuts.
When we talk about lenses, I've done a lens and got probably so much hate from it because it was using the Olympus Pro line lenses, and I did a video saying I'm getting rid of those for the less expensive Panasonic lenses. And a lot. I mean, I probably got more. I don't know. Maybe it's like 50-50. Maybe more praises than not. But really, I'm telling you something. If you're going to be this is a magazine I did. Now this is a smaller format, but I've done regular size formats. You don't know what camera, what lens. I mean, we're talking pixel peeping stuff. So shame me if you must. But I'm so not into. Depends on what you do. Majority of people are Instagram, put things up to Instagram, which you'll never notice a $3,000 lens from a $300 lens. You just won't. So for me, I'm all about getting the inexpensive stuff that is good quality for what I do. And I always point to this one. This was an Olympus Micro Four Thirds lens. It's sharper than anything I've ever seen. So that's my take on overly priced sharp lenses. I know people don't like to hear that, but yeah, that's how I feel.
Well, I agree. I noticed too here, Hero said I'd get the Rocky on 12 millimeter manual for like 150 on eBay. No,
you know what? I'm filming right now and like, if you have been watching our Facebook page, it's the Metacon. I always forget all these numbers. The Metacon 35 millimeter f/0.95 manual focus lens, and I mean, I started using like autofocus lenses for a long time, but when you really get a manual focus lens and you, at least on the Fuji camera, I have it set up to where you push one button and it punches in and you focus. And it's just like, I'm actually fiddling around less. I mean, everybody's different, but I'm fiddling around less with a manual focus lens than I am a focus lens. Now, an autofocus lens. If you're shooting a model, a one-person thing, face tracking, eye autofocus, that's the fastest and easiest because you point your camera, boom, it takes it. But if there's a multiple group of people, or you're shooting stuff or things or through objects and all that stuff, still eye autofocus on one model can do pretty good. But one problem I had when I was shooting a wedding with the Sony a7 III, and I think it was the Zeiss 55, is I don't know how to explain this, but like in my composition, they were over to the left, and I was getting like Jesus on the cross kind of here. So they were on the right, Jesus on the cross was on the left to give some foreground substance and all that. And then they had one of the groom's guy on the left, and it kept picking his eye and then not that. And then there's this thing where you go, if you get close, I'm fiddling around with all the stuff that if I had a manual focus lens, which I ended up putting in the manual focus, I put my eye up, I punch in, focus on her, boom. So in a lot of situations, manual focus for me is a lot quicker than fiddling around with joysticks and touching. And yeah, so this has been great for me. I almost never miss focus, even at 0.95, which is an f1.4 full frame equivalent.
Well, there are a lot of even fashion photographers use manual. I know Lara Jade, who's a very good
fashion
so
easy
photographer.
It's so easy.
She uses manual focus all the time. Mike
It's
Walters
really
also
easy.
said, can you work there normal in Australia? Here in North Europe, we can work more and more, luckily, but for how long, I don't know. Yes, well, I can, Mike. I can because I'm outside of that restriction, but obviously most of my work comes from inside the area that's locked down. Until yesterday, well, we're still not in official lockdown. It starts at 12 o'clock today, 12 p.m. But up until now, yes, we could again. We could do weddings with up to, I think it was 50 people. And then I think the next stage was going to be 100. But now we've been locked back for another 6 weeks. So here, no. But I've got a feeling that this is going to be the norm everywhere, unfortunately. Like it seemed to be, we had very few cases in summer. And then the second winter comes, because we had none. I mean, we literally had no cases at all.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden it started up and it just skyrocketed to where we had 190 odd yesterday. It's like I said, it's still low, very low on world numbers. I think, unfortunately, we've had 2 deaths, which is still terribly terrible, but it's very low compared to what overseas people are getting. But it looks like, it can just spike up again out of nowhere. So it's...
Mike says that manual focus is bad for his eyesight. Well, you could see, like, just a year ago, literally, I didn't need these at all. Just a year ago. But now I have to use these more and more. And I'm finding wearing these is just, oh my gosh, it's just terrible when you're doing photography. But your camera should have an EVF like mine. And I always use the EVF anyways, when my eyes were bad or good. And I typically... in the EVF, it's just everything you can, use the diopter and make it focus just like you're wearing glasses. And for me, even though my eyesight's starting to fail me, manual focus is just easy. I put that eye, I punch in, and I got it. And also, Fujifilm has really good focus peaking. So I put it in red. So even if I am using the back of the screen, like maybe it's low and it's wet and I don't feel like laying on the ground like me and Gilbert do, I could put the camera down there. And the Fujifilm has a half flippy screen, and then I could see the red focus peak and that light at 0.95, especially whatever you want in focus is lit up. So I find it easy, even though my eyesight is failing. So yeah, I think the features of these mirrorless cameras are pretty good.
And plus, like Rob also said, Voigtlander makes a slow 5.6, 10 mil, and 15 millimeter manual lens. I love the Voigtlander lenses. But if you're dealing with wide angle, it's very easy to get focus anyway, because almost everything's in focus anyway.
Yeah. But I find it pretty easy.
What did Langston say? Aaron and David, it's more the price in my decision. My a7 III still kicks butt as a photo hybrid camera, but I'm booked all the time for video now. So, yeah, and because Langston now is doing video solely, I mean, the Blackmagic are amazing video cameras. They really are.
I'm the opposite. I used to do mainly video, but 6 years ago kind of switched to the photography thing, the majority of my stuff.
Well, Femi also said 12 millimeter is very useful focal length for real estate photographers to shoot shoebox apartments, etc. Like I said, I very rarely ever need past 16, but I would like I said, a prime that will take me wider than that for when I occasionally need it. I just don't shoot that wide. I like that 20 mil sort of 24 sort of focal length range. That's probably what I like if I'm dealing with wide angle, but I'm more doing portraits and stuff rather than landscape. Rather than, real estate and stuff.
Yeah, it depends on what you do. I'm the same. I just don't use wide lenses. And usually I did lots of weddings on Panasonic, which was a 40 millimeter full frame equivalent. And it's a kind of a 35 millimeter. It's like really close there. And I was able to get everything I wanted with that. So I'm not much of a wide lens guy.
Yep. Brett just said be safe down there, David. Yep, I'm pretty well right, Brett. Like I said, it's not in my area, so we should be fine.
Dana came up with something real quick. Dana said something kind of important here. Where was it? A lens designed for manual focus is much easier to use than a lens designed for autofocus. Now that's true. This is like the misconception people have when they have a mirrorless camera with the fly-by-wire focusing, whatever it's called. It's terrible. I can't stand it. So anybody who's kind of into that and have that camera for the first time and have those lenses for the first time and they switch it in manual mode, like, this is just crappy, But when you get a true manual focus lens, it makes the world of difference because the focus throw is much greater. It's dampened more. You can actually feel like any little twitch you make, it moves it. Whereas fly-by-wire or whatever, you move it a little bit, then it goes too quick. Yeah, it's a disaster. Yeah. So people who never use it, on a real manual focus lens is way, way different than a fly-by-wire in manual focus.
Those SLR lenses that I used were great. Plus, they have hard stops. So when you're moving them around, they'll have a hard stop.
Yeah.
Unlike the fly-by-wire. The thing I noticed those. With if you're doing video or whatever you're doing, it's repeatability is the issue with your fly-by-wire because it all depends on how quickly you move that lens barrel. If you move it quicker, you haven't got the repeatability because it changes, and that's one of the problems. So if you wanted to rack focus between two objects, it's very easy on a manual lens because it doesn't matter how fast or whatever you turn it, it's still that set focus range on that lens. But if it's fly-by-wire, if you move it a little bit quicker, it'll shoot past or it doesn't get to it. It's really hard.
Now, I did say that I didn't... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say, but I'm an AF. I really am an autofocus type guy, unless I have to go manual, which I do sometimes.
I did say I use autofocus all the time. For video, it was always manual focus, and it was in the DSLR era, so I had it wasn't fly-by-wire. When I got into the mirrorless thing with the Panasonic, when I started doing video, I would do manual focus with those fly-by-wire, and it was terrible. But then when I started doing photography, it was all auto. Until recently, I play around with the manual focus lenses.
Yeah, see, gimbal, Langston also said the same thing. He said, it's a problem I still have on my gimbal shots. The lack of repeatability makes me miss shots sometimes, and that's with those lenses. All right, so let's get stuck into the first story, Aaron. So if you want to put the time in.
Got it.
And I'm just going to share my screen because we're going to talk about the Nikon announcement. So I think it is application. Which one is it? Is it this one? I think so. Yep, that's the one. All right. So let me just move that over. This is a announcement this morning that I saw it's actually on Petapixel. It looks like Nikon, and this is really interesting. We believe there's going to be the Z5 that's going to come out fairly soon, which is the low-end camera. But it looks like they're going to be doing two new cameras for the Z6 and the Z7, Aaron. So this is really quite interesting. Yeah. And they're saying that basically what's going to be included in this camera is they're going to have dual X-speed processors, a new battery, so they're replacing the battery compared to the old one. The ability to be powered over USB, possibly thanks to that new battery, because you can't do that apparently on the cameras at the moment. Dual memory card slots. That was the big, that was the big letdown with their previous camera. So you've got dual memory card slots. No word yet on whether the second card will be SD or CF Express. Now, it is also going to have 4K 60, they're saying. So they've upped the game considerably in the video side of things.
That should be standard.
I know. The ability to use proper vertical grip with button controls. I think they do 4K 60 now, but oh, no, they don't. I think it's just higher bit depths. If Ike was here, he'd be able to say. I don't think the Nikons currently do 4K 60 internal. But they're saying it'll probably be internal by the look of that. The ability to use a proper vertical grip, because there's no grip for the older cameras. And it just says down the bottom that this would be a welcome update for the Nikon faithful, especially those that have been holding off going into mirrorless because of their lack of dual card slots, or the fact that neither the Z6 or Z7 can shoot 4K 60. Oh, well, there you go, so they can't. It would also be a solid proof that Nikon is listening to its user base and making the changes that they demand. And they're saying it's likely to be in the fall, around about October. Now, I'll just quit this screen sharing. Where are we? Stop sharing. So this is really interesting, because the problem for me, I think the Nikon, and if you watch people like Ike and all that shoot, they're amazing. I mean, the cameras themselves are really good. The autofocus is really good. The LCD screen on the back is amazing. The EVFs are good. And the quality of the files are also very good. The thing that was lacking really, I thought, was the fact that you couldn't have your dual card slots. And I thought that was just I couldn't believe it, to be honest, when they released that camera without that. I thought, well, wow, they're not looking after the professional photographers out there.
Right.
But it looks like, Aaron, that they've fixed everything there, and they've also put 4K 60 in the camera.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Nikon D750 was one of my probably one of my favorite cameras of all time. I just the feel, the files, the video. Even though the video wasn't top notch, the quality of those files were amazing. The color and all that stuff. But what kind of killed it for me after that, I think I had this. What is the 7200? That's the APS-C version or something like that. The thing that killed it with me is at that time I was still doing a lot of video and just bouncing back and forth video like someone like you that does the hybrid type shooting. It was horrible, you know. So kind of went away from that. So at least I see them now starting to pick up the game in video, and then the dual card slots, you know, on these newest ones killed it for me. So once I see a camera that doesn't have dual card slots, I just can't go there. So they lost me after years of not quite getting it. So hopefully that they do better with this and nail it.
Well, I think they have to, don't they? I mean, if you look at their sales figures from the last few, I mean, everyone is suffering, but Nikon was suffering quite badly. So they have to do something, you know, fairly serious to get people to buy a new camera, because they're going to need all the help that they can get, I suppose. But it looks like, you know, having the dual card slots solves a real problem, and also putting the 4K 60 in that, because the video actually from those cameras is outstanding. It really is quite beautiful. And the output for those cameras is beautiful as well. So it's a good thing. I just don't know what's going to happen there, but at least they seem to be listening to their customers, which is a great thing. And also it puts competition, you know, out there. Like Sony obviously have to have a camera that will give us 4K 60 shortly, that will combat that as well. So this is probably where the A7 IV is going to be. I wouldn't think this is the A7S. Right. That's going to be more elitist or a higher end video camera, but they're going to have to answer this with something like an A7 IV, I think, Aaron. So.
Yep, I think you're right about that. Mike's asking, are the birds in my room? They're not birds. They're teeny little frogs like this in Puerto Rico. These frogs are only found in 2 places on Earth, and Puerto Rico is one of them. Small little frogs like this, and they're just about as plentiful as you would have crickets in most parts of the United States. And they're outside. They're very loud. And everybody in all my YouTube videos like, oh my gosh, you must live in Puerto Rico, or they missed those sounds and all that. So small little frogs outside.
It's probably quite soothing, or does it drive you nuts? You probably don't hear them anymore.
Well, it drives me nuts. Yeah, they don't drive me nuts no more, but they drove me nuts when I'm trying to do YouTube videos, because I just felt like they were so annoying. But
I don't mind.
you
It's
know.
quite a nice sound. It's a bit soothing. So it's
Yeah, I don't mind them personally, but for my videos, I never liked them, you know.
Hero said in Puerto Rico, every house comes with trained birds that chirp in the evening.
Yeah. Frogs, they're
So-
little frogs.
So let us know what you think about that. I mean, do you think it's enough what Nikon have done? Look, I think Nikon made a big mistake when they released the Z6 and the
Yeah.
Z7 without those dual card slots. I thought that was a
Yeah.
massive mistake that they made, and I did bag them when they did that. And hopefully
I
now
remember.
this might be the thing that, you know, brings them back and gives them a lot more sales, because people wouldn't, I definitely wouldn't have gone from the digital SLR and sold a digital SLR if I was shooting weddings or events or something like that, which have dual card slots, and then get into
Yep.
the mirrorless side of things where it's only got one. There's no way I would have done that if I had the choice. Although I did do that when I went from Sony, but I had to do that because I needed video at the time. There was no way I could get out of it. But if I had the choice, I would have stayed to digital SLR. This may be the thing now that pushes people that have the digital SLRs into the mirrorless. So it's interesting anyway.
Jim's complaining about your black hole.
I haven't got it on again.
I know, it's off. And he doesn't like it.
I'm going to turn it
Jim
on.
doesn't like it. That's funny. I live in a Disney movie. I do. It's like you should see
There
my
it
yard.
is.
It looks so.
There it is. It's back
wonderful.
on.
There, yay! We got the black hole up and running. Thanks,
All right,
Jim.
So let's go into the next story, Alan. We're going to
Okay.
talk about manual aperture and also shutter speed. So we're going to discuss what we use and why we use it in certain situations. And I'd love you guys to give us your opinion too about what you shoot in. I'll go first, and then Aaron can sort of talk about what he does, because we've both got a couple of pics that we want to show as well. So
Yeah.
90% of the time I use manual. So nearly all the time I use that. Now, just to show people that, you know, aren't sort of up with everything, it's on your mode dial up the top up here. So you'll have a dial that will say M, S, A, and P. P I never ever use. That's just program mode. But like I said, for me, 90% of the time I shoot manual exposure. And the reason why I do that is because I like to be in control of everything, which is the shutter speed, the aperture, and even the ISO. A lot of people we've had discussions before use auto ISO. Now, I don't use auto ISO because I like to be in control of everything. So I use manual ISO and manual exposure. So I set my aperture and shutter speed correctly, and I do that very, very fast. So I usually I'll look at the scale at the bottom, which is your light meter, and I'll also look at the histogram to give me an idea about what my exposure is, and then I'll do it that way. So that's nearly all the way that I work, you know. And when I'll just bring up an image that I can sort of talk about. Let me just open this, open with preview. And I'll just share a couple just so that you can see them. Share screen. Application window. Even weddings, if we're looking at, say, something like this.
Ooh, gorgeous.
Where is that? Oh, I'll just quit that. Even with things like this, I'll do these manual. So most weddings I will shoot with manual, and I'll explain where I start to change over to different type of things. And the reason why I love to shoot manual, particularly, this has flash involved. I like to basically balance the exposure, the aperture in the background for what I like the look of, and also if there's any movement and things like that in the image. They were dancing actually at the time, but they weren't dancing very, very fast. So I like to shoot things manual and get things where like I said, I'm in full control. In this case, because I'm using flash, I'd adjust for the ambient and then I'd add the flash in. That's one example. Now, occasionally though, I will shoot aperture mode. Now, why do I move to aperture mode? Well, the only time really I do it is if I'm working in something like a church, and I'm doing a church and I know they're going to then walk out of the church at the end, and it's going to change too quick. Like, there's no way I can be following a bride and groom out of the church and be using manual exposure to get a quick enough changing exposure as they walk out. It's too hard to do. So in that case, I usually use aperture mode, and then I can just use the compensation dial to turn the exposure up or down. which will give me an image. So the second they're in the church, it's fine. As soon as they walk outside and the light brightens right up and it's a completely different exposure, I would go into aperture mode. So I use it in times where I have to move very, very fast. Aperture's great for that because you really don't have to worry about setting your aperture and your shutter speed independently. You just set your aperture and then you just use your exposure compensation to move up and down. And if you've on auto ISO in that case, which is what I would do, everything works out for you fine and it's quick to move. So that's really the only time that I tend to use aperture mode. And like I said, Aaron will talk about something different in his views in a minute. Now, the time that I go to shutter speed is when I'm doing images like this. And let me just open up a couple. Preview. So I'll open up a couple here. Share screen. It's more when I have to stop things in motion and things like that. So say, for instance, I was doing an image like this. This is a perfect example where I would change from using aperture mode and go into shutter speed mode. Because for me, the important thing here is to stop the dancer mid-flight. I don't want any movement in the dancer here. I want to make sure that because she's moving so fast, and she is moving really, really fast, I don't want any blurring. There's no flash used here. This is just natural light. I wanted to make sure that her fingers haven't got any movement in them because you'll get blur. If your shutter speed isn't fast enough in this type of scenario, you will get blur coming in. So in this case, what I would do is I would use shutter speed over aperture because I don't really care that much what happens with the aperture in the background. What cares more to me is that the dancer is rock solid in that she hasn't got any movement showing at all. Now, if you wanted to show movement, and I'll show you one somewhere else where I changed this to show movement. Let me just open up something else for you, and I'll show you this one. So if we look at this one, let me just stop, and I'll share the screen again. So this is a different one where I would also use shutter speed, but this is to slow the shutter down. So
oh, I remember that's a
yeah,
cool
in
one.
this case here, I wanted to make it slow so that that tram has the movement in the background. So again, aperture isn't playing in this. It's the whole feeling that you get from this type of shot here is due to the fact that I've slowed the exposure down. The camera's on a tripod. Now, because any movement in the model here, Grace was her name, any movement at all, you'd see, well, if you look at the people in the background, they're blurry. That's because they're moving. I've asked Grace here to keep perfectly still, and there's an off-camera flash at the side. And so she's being kept still by the flash exposure. So the flash is the thing that has stopped Grace from moving in this situation. So that's the difference here. So this is an area where I would use shutter speed again to get that shutter speed slow enough that it would work. And I would just let the aperture basically fall to whatever I needed. You could shoot this in manual, but I wanted to, do this quickly. So there's a couple of areas there where I wanted to show how I shoot things normally. Like I said, 90% of the time I'm shooting totally manual, where I have full control over aperture and also shutter speed and ISO. If there's any movement at all, I then go into shutter speed priority, because like I've just showed you with those sort of images of stopping that dancer or slowing down the tram. And if I'm doing quick things, like if I need to work very, very quickly and I haven't got time to work manually, that's when I'll go into aperture mode. So that's sort of it for me, Aaron. If you wanted to sort of talk about now what you do.
What I do is I use ever since I can't remember when I used auto for like so many years. I've only used manual, and like you, Dave, you get really quick at it, and you're like and you can get it. It wasn't until I got the Sony a7 III is when I started using Aperture Priority, because you could put it in auto ISO. And I think you can also have it not go below a certain shutter speed, if I'm correct. So I would have those two things set up because, the Sony a7 III is so good with handling noise in low light situations. I was confident that having it in aperture priority, I would just open, let's say it was the Tamron or an f1.8 lens. I would open it up all the way most of the time for fast movements or whatever. I would usually only stop down if I need to see more in focus or something, but typically wide open, aperture priority, auto ISO. And I mean, most of the time that shutter speed wouldn't go below whatever I'm shooting at. So if I'm shooting something that I know shouldn't go below 60, then I would set it to not go below whatever I'm shooting. So aperture priority didn't come into my life till I got the Sony a7 III. And probably 90%, if not more, of our shots going through Europe not using flash, I probably used aperture priority, auto ISO, and I use zebras to expose, and I use the back dial as a compensation.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would point my camera at, let's say, whatever it is, let's say a landscape, or even my wife was modeling for me. Whatever is zebra is blown out, and I would just use exposure compensation till I didn't want that to be blown out anymore, whatever's blowing out, and I would take the shot, and then in post I would raise the shadows. It worked like a charm on the Sony a7 III. On the Fuji cameras, it's pretty good, but or on the Panasonics, I wouldn't use aperture priority and do it that way. I would just do full manual. So I'm kind of back and forth with those two. I almost never use shutter speed, shutter priority, only because if it's a situation like that, I would just always dial it in manually. It's not until I use flashes where I use manual, but I would say when I'm using the Fuji, I just got into manual right away. So if you've seen any of my photos in the last 2 months, it was probably in manual. I still to this day probably feel more comfortable using manual. Just like you said, you just don't want, I don't want to be like, oh man, the ISO went too high or the shutter speed went too slow. Even though the Fuji cameras, you can set it at 250th and you can use auto ISO. I just like to know what's going on, and I'm so fast at it that I typically am using probably manual again more times than not. And then I will show something. Well, do I need to show this? Yeah, I'll show this. Let's see how we do this, David.
Well, while you're bringing that too, Altric said he uses 90% aperture priority and auto ISO. See, a lot are using auto ISO. Let us know too in the chat, guys. I mean, how many are you?
Can you see that, David?
Auto ISO. Yep, I'll just bring it up on the screen. There you go. Yep. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that shot.
This is the typical shot that I would have on a Sony a7 III, and I would put the camera up. It's doing its auto ISO. Aperture is how much blur I want in the background, how much I want in focus or not. And then I would use zebras and crank it down till the sky isn't blown out. Or if I know it's going to really be struggling with a raw file, I'll blow it out a little more. That's just something through trial and error, where how much, well, I better blow that out a little more because it's just going to be way too dark and look really crappy in post. And that's how I would do it in aperture priority. Just point it like this. Now, this was with the Fuji camera, and I did this one in manual just because I feel like I can do it almost just as quick as aperture priority, because there's nothing really happening fast here. It's not like my wife is a bride coming and I just want to make sure I nail it, where I'm doing all these dials trying to get it in and I missed the shot. If this was a bride coming down, absolutely aperture priority. That way I wouldn't have to deal with anything, and I would just use highlight, exposure, or zebras to use aperture priority for this. So for this photo, it was full manual. So if it's not fast paced and I've got time, always manual. If it's fast paced, aperture priority. I guess I would have to X out of this. Let's see if I can share another screen here, David.
Just while you're doing that too, I just find there's something, now it's just me, but I find there's something very artistic and satisfying about shooting manual. And it's just something that I almost feel, and it's interesting, but I almost feel like I'm cheating on myself when I use aperture mode. It probably sounds stupid, but I just like the thought of the art side of it, with me choosing the aperture and the shutter speed and the ISO all independently to get the image that I'm after. Like I said, it's just it's just a thing that I can't seem to get over.
Well, I think you're right. I kind of feel the same. Maybe it just comes from the background of shooting. I don't know what it is, but I do like, because I mean, how are you going to shoot how are you going to shoot something and something just keeps blowing out? Like, you put it in aperture priority and there's a certain thing in that scene you want to get under control, but everything you move, it's always staying the same. It's going to be frustrating. Like, I want that shadow to be darker, but it just keeps, it's always just a battle. So, putting it in manual, and you look at especially with a mirrorless camera, you're seeing what you get. So when I'm dialing it in, I'm like, that's exactly what I want the photo to look like. And then you take a shot. So with Aperture Priority or any of the other ones, you're just not you're always going to be fighting it. So that's why I probably prefer manual most of the time. Although with the Sony a7 III, I found that I was using Aperture Priority for the first time in my life more than manual. Now, here's a shot. Can they see this one, David?
Yep, let me bring it up. Yep.
Now, this was from the same photo session as you saw with my wife with the violin out there, but this was inside a room, and it was, even though it was light outside, it was still kind of dark. So in this situation, I used a flash, but when I use flash, I want it to look natural, and I think I pulled it off here, making it look more like natural window light coming in, because I'm just enhancing the window light already, but by using a flash, bouncing it off the other wall, it just made a big flash on the wall, so it came back looking natural. And of course, can you use Aperture Priority when you're doing flash? Probably not. You're going to get all kind of wonky stuff. So
no,
you have to put it.
You can. Yeah, you can.
Okay, I never used it.
Yep.
I would always use manual because I want to put everything in manual and then just increase my light once I got my ambient right. Then I can all I have to do is worry about just increasing the flash until it looks right. So manual for me is just easier, because like I'm saying, I use flash for here, but then we went outside and did that. And since I was already in manual, it was a no-brainer. It was easy. I didn't have to think about nothing. So that's how I typically use it.
I was going to say too, the issue too is if you're using aperture mode, it's hard to control things. Like every time something could change, the light will change, the background can change, everything else. That's why it's better to shoot manual, because then it's locked in. Yeah. But I can totally understand, like I said, there's times when I use aperture mode too, if I want to work very fast. Like Aldrich said, he uses it 90% in weddings. Everyone's different in how they want to work. I very rarely use aperture mode, but Kerry is always in aperture mode because Kerry, like I've said to you before, is not the she's not the more geeky type that likes to control the dial. She just wants to move the exposure compensation dial and get the exposure each time and just shoot off. So she's different to me completely.
What does she do? Does she set the shutter speed to not go below something? Because that's the danger if your camera can't do that.
Aaron. I do it. Kerry is a total noob if you're dealing with... Kerry is an artist. Kerry is a complete utter artist. But she hates technology. She hates it completely. So at the beginning of the day, I set her up. I put her on auto ISO. I set the minimum shutter speed so it'll be a certain shutter speed. So, you don't go below 1/100th or something. And then she'll fire away for the rest of the day. And usually I'll look at her work and I'll go, oh, my God, it's just incredible. But she hates... I've tried to teach her. I've tried to teach her how to shoot manual and everything else, and it would not go in because I don't think she's interested, to be honest. She just wants to look at the image and get art, and that's the funny thing. Well, it's not funny. It's great, actually, in a way, but she's the complete opposite. So I set the camera up for her at the beginning of the day or for each section, that we're going to use, and then she'll just fire away from that. She's not interested in the sort of mechanics at all. Yeah, which is bizarre, really.
That's the thing, the cameras are... With the Sony a7 III, I didn't have the Fuji's long enough to experiment with Aperture Priority too much, but it does have a minimum shutter, and that's very important. Once you kind of set that and you kind of know where you're shooting, like if you're shooting out in the bright daylight, you could probably put the minimum shutter at whatever, and as long as your aperture is like at f1.8, let's say, it's just always going to use a fast shutter speed and a low ISO, so you're probably safe. It's when you get into the church where it starts getting a little iffy, where you have to really make sure that you set that minimum shutter to be... I mean, in a church, if people are just sitting there like this, listening to the pastor, and there's not a lot of movement, you could probably shoot at 60th of a second, hold the camera still. Whether you have image stabilization or not is another story. But I shot with 60 a lot of times, and I got sharp shots. But if people start moving around, then of course. But I just feel like I could sit there and dial in the manual, and it's all set. That's what I wanted to look at, and I just could fire and shoot and never have to worry about if the camera's doing something I don't want it to do.
Dana mentioned a good point here. He said, manual focus is just like manual exposure. when you can afford to slow down, it puts you more in touch with what you were doing. And that's why I said I agree with that. That's like the art.
Let me
it's like
tell
the
you.
art side to me.
The
camera
let me,
also said,
oh, go ahead.
I'll chat for this. Aperture priority plus minimum shutter speeds most times. Switch to manual if I want a certain look. Yes, you were going to say, Aaron?
Yeah, manual, since I've been using the Fuji with the manual lens on there and manual aperture, oh my gosh, there's so, and a prime lens. Now you've got a prime lens, you've got manual exposure, and you got a manual lens. I work really fast, and that kind of really puts a hamper on the way I work. But if you have the time and there's not like a wedding where, oh my gosh, here comes the bride, here comes all this stuff, that's a whole different story, or events or something. Just typical photography of anything or models where it's a photo session, you've got time. Man, that really is, and I'll show you a photo later on using manual aperture, manual exposure, manual focus, and a prime lens. It makes you slow down, and I start seeing things like, whoa, man, look at, and yeah, it really kind of changed the way I've been shooting lately. So Dana's right.
What's Ultra saying here? That's how I have my A9 set up. I use AV mode, and I have a custom button to switch to manual mode when I need to. I might do a video to show how I have mine set up. Yeah, do that, Altric, and share it in the photography videography school.
Group.
Yeah, it'd be great. Because Langston said it blew my mind when Altric basically showed him how to use auto ISO.
Yeah, it's pretty easy, you know, with the sensor like that, you know, you can bring back shadows and stuff.
When push comes to shove, if Kerry is getting the shot she wants, that's all that really matters. Exactly. And it's also...
That's all it ever matters.
Guy with the camera also said, I'm with Kerry on that too, even if I'm a tech geek. Yeah, she, like I said, she's not interested in the tech side, but she's a great artist, and that's really all that matters, because the images are what matter, really.
Yep, as long as she gets what she's going for, then who cares?
Dwayne said hello, so Dwayne's here as well. I want to know why everyone is going crazy for the 12-24 when the f4 is spectacular. Sony should do a true medium format camera. Well, I suppose it's just new, Dwayne. I'm certainly not going to buy that lens because I could not justify the money of that 12-24. There's no way I'm going to be paying $5,000 for a 12-24 lens. I'd get the f4 version, but like I said, I just want a prime.
I would have to ask him, who's going crazy? Is it all the people who have been given it by Sony to sell them lenses?
That's probably true. Yeah.
YouTube, that's all YouTube is now, man. It's just like a selling platform. It's been like that for a while now. You know, someone gives something and most of the reviewers are like, wow, this is great, it's amazing. And then, yeah, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the thing you've got to understand, guys, with that lens, most photographers do not need that lens, and that's the thing. You definitely do not need a 12-24 2.8. Sony really have done an amazing thing because they've produced a lens that really is a very incredibly high-ended lens, and it looks like it is an incredible high-ended lens, but most of us don't need that much of a lens. Like if you've got an R4 and you're shooting extremely wide all the time, it would be amazing because it certainly would resolve that sensor. But for the average user, like what I am, what Aaron is, and most of you guys,
I got a 24 megapixel.
Yeah, you definitely do not need to buy that lens. Like buy something else, like buy the 135 or a good 85, or if you need a wide angle lens, get the Sigma. The Sigma 14-24 may not be quite as good, but it's good enough for most of us, and no one will ever pick that there's a problem with that lens compared to the Sony, and it's half the price. It might even be more than less than half the price. Like it's incredible. What did Langston say too? Langston said, I use auto ISO because a lot of my photos are BTS set photos, so I'm grabbing fleeting moments with no time to fiddle. Yep, and can completely understand that, Langston. I set my aperture and shutter speed how I want and let the auto ISO assist.
Well, you can, like on most cameras, I think, the Fuji camera, you can set it to maximum ISO. So you could put it at, like, I'd be comfortable shooting at 6400 as long as I'm exposing a third of a stop over. So I can let that go auto all the time. And then because it has a dial, I can, like, I have a habit of when I have the front, I forget what, command dial and the back command dial on stuff, I have a complete habit of shooting too fast and just, oh my, I need to get that. And lower the shutter speed too slow, and then I get a blurry shot. Even though I've been shooting for years, that's just a problem I have. With the Fuji cameras, I can set the dial and lock it. Now I can't change it, and I can let the ISO do whatever it wants, or I can lock it, and then I have the aperture ring. So for me, I can't. It slows me down enough, and I can't accidentally change stuff. So for me, it's like been really good. But I think these cameras are good enough to let ISO go to 3200, 6400.
Oh,
they look
easy,
amazing.
yeah.
I mean, it's like
they go above
even
that.
more, 4000 or
Yeah.
wait, 64. No, what's
6400,
the?
I tend
What's
to
the
cut
other
it
one
out
after
about-
that?
Well, I go to 6400 often.
I forget the other one.
Yeah, so the 64, and then it goes to
120 or something, right? I don't know. But I usually don't ever get up that high anyways. On my 6400 seems to be adequate.
Yeah, so you've got
Oh, yeah, you
64, you've got, where are you, 4000, so it's 3200, 4000, 5000, 6400, 8 and 10,000, 1600. 16,000. I tend to finish around 6400. I mean,
Yeah, that's me too.
If I needed to go above that, I would, as long as you're critical with your exposure. But I tend to keep mine around about that, between 100 to 6400, and then vary it from that. I don't like to go above 6400 unless I have to.
Yeah, and see, a lot of people always talk about low light, where some people do need low light type of photography. But for the majority of stuff I've done for the last, 10 years, I don't think I ever need that much. And if I do, I use flash. So for what I shoot, so auto ISO could be a great thing to use, I don't think it's a problem.
Dwayne said, yes, laugh out loud. Great question, Aaron. Yes, all the YouTube pushes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
What else have we got? Langston also said, laugh out loud, YouTube pushes. Now, I thought this was an interesting comment too, because Nivak said, I would love the 12 to 24 GM, but I have the 16 to 35 GM and the 24 GM, so I don't need it. I wish they had a 10 to 18 G like I have on APS-C. See, I use that 10 to 18 on APS on full frame all the time, and I use it at 12 millimeters. It's not fantastic, but it's good enough for the amount of time that I have to go very, very wide, because you can use that 10 to 18 APS-C mode on full frame from 12 to 16. So as long as you don't go past 16, you're fine. And if you don't go below 12, you're fine as well. So you do get a 12 millimeter full frame lens out of that lens, and it's quite cheap compared to the others. So I use that, but I would like occasionally, like I said, I'd love, say, a 12 millimeter prime that I could just throw on. There's no way though I'm going to be sort of spending that much money for the 12 to 24, because the amount of time I would use it,
and what would you use it for?
Well, just the only time I would use it is if I'm shooting a bride in a very enclosed room and I wanted the space, Aaron. That's really the only time that I would ever use it. Or sometimes I'm doing group photos outdoors or in a church, and I just, like if you're shooting 200-300 people, you need a wide angle
I've never
lens
shot
enough.
that many people.
Yeah, you need enough to get the people in. That's where I'll use my 10 to 18 and put it on 12 to give me that little bit of extra. But I definitely do not need the 12 to 24. If you need it, you would know you need it. If you don't need it, I would not be buying it, because.
And who needs it?
Well, that's what I wonder that too. Yeah, it's
just people with money and can do it, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. And that's about it.
Should we go to the next one?
Yeah, we'll go to the next one. So the next story is to crop in camera or in post. And I wanted to have a discussion about this because I thought it might be interesting to do. And I'll explain first. I think Aaron's got an image that he's going to share. But personally, I try to get the image correct in camera as much as possible. Now, what I mean by that is I try to get the exposure as close to possible as what it will be in the final. Also, I tend to crop as well. So I don't crop in post. I very rarely crop in post. Now, I suppose if you have an A7R4, you can crop in post because you have the pixels to do it. But what you've got to understand is that that's exactly the same as if you're shooting APS-C. It's exactly the same as if you've made your camera go into APS-C. That obviously doesn't affect things like compression and things like that. The reason why I like to shoot and crop in post is because I'm shooting for a certain look in post. Now, when I do that, I want the compression, the bokeh in the background and everything else to be the way that it appears to my eye that I want at that time. And the only way you can do that is to actually crop it in camera, because you can't, if you crop an image in, it doesn't change the depth of field. The depth of field is as you've shot it. And, you know, all it does is it basically moves in, deletes some pixels, and then you crop in. It's like I said, it's the same as if you're shooting APS-C mode on the camera. If you want the true depth of field of full frame cameras, you have to basically crop in camera, because otherwise you're just not going to get the look that you like. You know, like if you've got this beautiful bokeh, cropping into that is to make that bokeh any better. It's going to stay exactly the same as it is. The only way you'll get the real, say for instance you were trying to get the massive bokeh balls, the only way you can do that is to frame it correctly in camera and then crop it like it is in camera. So I tend to personally nearly always crop in camera. Now I'm shooting with a 24 megapixel camera anyway, so I've got to be careful how much I would crop in anyway. But I suppose if you have an R4 or whatever, you could crop in like crazy if you needed to. That is an advantage if you need to do that, because you can get multiple shots out of the one shot. But having a 24 megapixel camera, I try to tend to get it correct in camera. How do you work, Aaron? Because I know you had I'm not saying I never crop. I do sometimes, but I crop minimal. I very rarely crop extensively. What's your opinion, Aaron?
Yeah, I almost never crop in post. It's just I like to see it in camera, like you've said. There's also a thing, someone, you know, kind of complained about me saying this before, but there's a parallax. I don't know how to explain this, but if I were to take a shot standing straight up like this, okay, and I were to crop that in, it's like, it's very sterile. It's just like, that's it, you know? So if I crop in like this, and now when I move, there's an iPad here, this is going to be just different. If I crop and then I recompose, this is going to be different in the frame. Sometimes I'm going to show you a photo that if I didn't crop this next photo in camera, it would have been a weird crop, and then I might have to go to what do you call it? Like not perfect crops, like, you know, like if you're going to print something in this size, let's say, I forget what you call that, you know?
Aspect ratio.
Yeah, the aspect ratio.
Yeah.
It's not good. You know, you might have to, you know, come in on the side and do these weird things where if you just had it cropped in camera, now it's like, oh, I can position it perfectly. Let me show you a photo. Dave, I'm going to share this.
Just while you're doing that too, Nash made a good comment though. He said, shooting fast birds, dogs, etc., you have to crop in post. Too hard to get in camera. The A7R4 is perfect for this. And I fully understand that, Nash, too. Wildlife as well, you may have to crop in post, and that's another... See, we don't do that, though, so we're shooting models and stuff like that, so we don't have to do it. I fully understand, too, what you're saying there.
So I'm sharing if you want to show that.
Yep, there it is.
Okay, so this shot here was from the Fuji X-T2 with the Medicon 0.95 35 millimeters. That's like a 50 millimeter f1.4. I stopped down a little bit because I wanted some things in focus here. And I love the square crop. I've loved it for years. And I was cropping after the fact on certain cameras to square, because none of the cameras that I've owned had a crop in camera of square. I think Panasonic might have had it, but the Sony's never had it. I think they have 16:9 and things like that. I don't know why all camera manufacturers don't do this, but the Fuji has a 1:1 crop, square crop, and I love it because I almost, like, I would say 90% of the photos you've seen in the last 2 or 3, was it 2 months? Maybe 2 months, maybe 3, I don't know, I might be going back too far. They were all square cropped in camera, and this is a 1:1 crop. It's in camera, and if I didn't have this in camera, this would be really hard to have matched her earring up with her mouth there. And everything like you see it with the bouquet, if that's how you call that, the bouquet. Here, if it was just a, what is the Fuji film? Dana probably would know. It's not a 3x2, it's a 4x3. No, it's a 3x2. Panasonic Micro Four Thirds is 4x3. I actually like 4x3 better than 2x3 or 3x2, whichever way we're talking, like the Sony has. And I like square crop. So by me having this square crop in camera, I think that might be blocking the view
I'm taking
of there. Yeah. Now, I could only do this in a perfect 1x1 by having it in camera, because I wanted the earring, I wanted her mouth, and I wanted the bouquet in the shot. So for me, I'm definitely 100% in camera crop. Now, if you would say like, oh, but you only have a 24 megapixel camera. Well, what is this going to? Well, this was for a magazine. Will this go in the magazine? I don't know what photos they choose or what, but this is a smaller magazine.
It's also good for Instagram too, Aaron. I mean, if you're shooting Instagram,
no, Instagram,
it's perfect.
oh my gosh. I was going to say that. That's another reason is half the photos I posted isn't for magazines like this might be. I don't know if they're going to show it, like I said. But Instagram, I can post it. I don't have to get Instagram to crop my image. I don't have to put bars on the side. So one-to-one crop is something I've been shooting a lot of. And if you're going to print it in this size of magazine, 24 megapixels, you'd probably only need maybe 8 megapixels or so, maybe even less for a magazine like this. This right here was 16 megapixel. I don't know I forget what size that is. That's 16 megapixel, and I always refer to this because if you get up to this thing with it's as sharp as you can imagine. So 24 megapixel, using it in a one-to-one crop, it's plenty. People just don't understand that. They always just, because I went with the Sony a7R III, thinking that I'm going to do all this stuff. It's just like it was overkill, and I don't need it. So I'm in camera crop for sure.
Yeah, because the thing too is that and I know because we looking here, Rob also said cropping in post allows you for trying different aspect ratios and allows you to fine tune to crop exactly the crop you want. And no, yep, I fully understand that. The issue for me is that I see it differently. When I look through the camera body when I'm taking the shot, I see that as a finished product, and often, if you try and crop it later, you don't get the same look. Like
I just showed you.
Yeah, like to look through the viewfinder and see it as the finished shot makes, for me, and remember, we're all different, Rob, and I fully understand we all work differently. But for me, I'm more like Aaron. I like to see the image in the viewfinder exactly as you're framing it and exactly as it's going to come out. And
like you said, David,
yeah, it's more art. Like that for me is more like art. It's more the fact of slowing down, going a little bit slowly, taking that shot that you like, looking at it, looking at the framing that you've got in the image, and then just clicking away and getting that image complete, to me, is everything.
Now, if you're shooting a landscape where everything's just kind of far out there, yeah, you can do all this cropping because like that parallax I'm talking about, it doesn't change because you're standing here. The image, the size of is so grand that you can move like this and nothing really changes. But when you're shooting within, I don't know how many yards, whatever, it is way different of moving your camera around like this. And just seeing parallax, things closer move faster, things further move slower, and things change. Whereas if you just stood like this, took a photo, and then just crop it, it's completely different. And you can do it, and there's no problem with it, but seeing it, how it's shifting as you move the camera, things are shifting. I mean, if I had a model here, my wife is standing here, and I just took a shot and cropped it, or if I move like, oh, look, I could see that cool thing on the wall back there, everything changes when you move the camera. So I think it's really important to do that, unless it's just a big grand, you're shooting a barn out there and there's a beautiful tree way out there. Moving like this is not going to change much. So just keep that in mind. You could try it, see if you like it. So yeah, I'm crop in camera. Now, some of the things they say, but if you crop it in camera, you can't uncrop or get back. Well, I'm looking at it and I want what I want in the frame. It's not like I'm cropping and then I take a photo like, oh man, later I should have got that oak tree in the back. I know I want it when I take the photo. So that's not an issue for me as well.
And like I said, it's all a personal choice. Like some of you just will say, well, I've got the A7R4 and I can change, later on in post. But like I said, to me, it's visually, when I look at something, I look at it from the fact of, this is what I want. I want that depth of field. I want that compression that's there and everything else. And you can only do that if you're cropping in camera, because cropping later on will change. It doesn't fix that aspect ratio. It doesn't fix that compression that you've got in the background, etc. And I like to see it as a finished article. Remember, like I said, some people say to me, even a wedding, that I'll work a lot slower than what a lot of other photographers tend to do. But the difference is, I'll only take one shot, whereas a lot of photographers will set something up and they'll go bang, 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 keep firing away, and then they'll do that for a while and then move on. And I've said this before,
You're so
a lot
right.
of brides and bridesmaids have said to me, David, you're amazing because you just set it up, you do one shot and then you move on. And that's because I take my time to get that shot correct in camera and it's done. I'll look at it once, I know if it's correct, and then I'll move on.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think we move too fast a lot of the time. That's that's the problem.
I do, but recently I've been slowing down because of the setup now. There's a saying that I heard a photographer say the other day, and I don't remember the rest of it, but it was like shoot less and something whatever. I can't remember, but it's true. If you shoot less and you take time, you can sometimes get more amazing shots than just rattling off stuff. I forget the saying and how his whole article behind it, but it was great. Now, yeah, Dana says when you crop, when you put it in the, this is the thing too, which is, I'm glad Dana's here to refresh my memory here. When I use that 1:1 crop mode in the Fuji camera, I'm very confident because if I want the full image, then the raw file is not cropped. So I was doing a lot of artistic stuff, not model stuff, which I typically always have done, but I'm taking more artistic things and whatever. And I know I can keep it in crop mode. And when you're in a 1:1, it means it's square. It doesn't matter if you hold the camera like this or if you put it like this, which is kind of nice because you never have to shoot like this. You can always shoot comfortably like this and get your composition because it doesn't change. It doesn't matter. However, with the Fuji camera, because the raw file is not cropped, I still do this because if I'm shooting something that might look better later, you know, let's say like this, then I'll shoot like this even though it's square, and I'll get my composition in square, the JPEG square. But if I said, oh man, I just cut the tip of her toe off, or oh, I do have the raw file. So that's cool that Dana brought that up. Thanks, Dana.
Tim said, in-camera crop allows you to frame it best for me. I really don't know why more cameras don't allow aspect ratio examples in screen. Neither do I. It's something that they should. Yeah, I know. It really is. Scott also said, where were we? Scott said, I always leave a little room on the side so I can make it a different aspect ratio as well. Like I said, we all shoot differently. For me too, if I think I'm going to want to change aspect ratios or whatever, I'll usually take 2 shots. I try and do that. Like whenever I'm doing a bride, for instance, I usually take, like for instance, if I will do a head, I'll do the head and shoulders, I'll do a full body.
Yeah, I do that too.
And I'll rotate a little bit around, but the cropping will be the same in each case, so that, you know, I usually don't have to change the aspect ratios. But like I said, we all shoot differently. Someone said it might also depend. It was Matthew actually said. Plus, I think it also depends if you started out in film days or digital days too, and that probably is true in a way.
I think so. I started out in film, so I think that just, you get used to a certain thing and it kind of just brings that over maybe. But I've been shooting digital so long, and film wasn't that, I don't know, you know, it wasn't like I spent years in, well, I've been a long time in film, but not like it was in my digital days.
I mean, for me, the thing I like, I hate cropping in Lightroom particularly. Anything that's going to slow me down in the editing process, I hate. I like to just basically import, have the images almost finished without any editing at all, and then I can move on. But the second, that's the one thing I do have to constantly tell Kerry, because Kerry always leaves too much room, and then I have to crop Kerry's images in, and that takes me a long time. Because if you have to do a lot of images and you're cropping, that's one thing that takes a long time. It's one thing I've got to try and train Kerry to shoot more like me in the regard of getting the image correct at the beginning rather than having me crop. But like I said, we all work differently. Kerry is the one that tends to leave more room outside of things, and then because it's me doing the final edit, I have to sort of crop her stuff down. So,
David, I'm sharing that photo again if you want to show that. And what you just said about getting it in camera, there's always that argument, you know, JPEG and RAW, and there's some guy that always says RAW, you're an idiot if you shoot JPEG, which is just dumb. Don't let anybody tell you how you should shoot, even though we're telling you how we shoot. You shoot however you want, and if you're getting images that you and or your client like, it doesn't matter what you're doing or what you use, keep doing it. For me, I would always shoot for the edit for so many years, but I recently with the Fuji camera, because I do like the colors, that you can actually tweak it. I mean, you can really make your colors how you want. That this photo that you're looking at now is absolutely straight out of camera. I mean, I didn't touch it. It's like literally, I didn't touch it. And before we went into this, I was, tuning in all the different color settings that you can do in the Fuji camera and getting that crop. And I mean, it's like, you talk about feel like you're cheating, David, when you're using Aperture Priority. When I looked at these photos, like I don't got to do nothing. And it's just that was it. So in camera is the way you had to do it in film, basically. With digital, you can do whatever you want. But man, it's just so nice to get back and see images like this. Like, I ain't got to do nothing. I mean, I felt weird, So I'm done.
Well, see, I understand, like Tim obviously is a wildlife photographer, and saying you just haven't got a choice if you're dealing with shooting birds and mammals. Yeah, that's completely different. I fully understand that.
Yep.
Joris also said, I agree with David on cropping. I think it's something that took with me from shooting 6x6 film and 4x5 film. Getting the frame right when pressing the button is time saving too. I have found that since I post so much on Instagram, I would love to be able to just shoot the square profile and
it's amazing,
do that
man.
finished as it is, and then I could just upload it straight to Instagram and visualize it as I'm seeing it there. I think that would be great, and I'd love to do that.
If you guys go to my Instagram, Aaron J. Anderson, scroll down. I mean, you'll see like there's a few that weren't, because like with my wife and the violin, there's just too much. It wasn't good for square. But if you scroll through there, you see so many square straight out of camera from the Fuji, and it just fits right in Instagram. It's amazing, man. That was just like, wow. I don't know why they don't allow you to just put it in the way let it reshape the way you shoot it. Just like they changed it. It used to be just square, and then they changed it a little bit. Just change it all the way. I don't know why they don't do that, but man, just posting it in square out of camera for me is just amazing on Instagram.
All right, so we'll show our pics. If you want to put that in your timeline, Aaron. So let me just share my screen. I'll just show you one.
Okay.
Application window. I wanted to show something different this time, which is a landscape shot that I did. Love this shot. It was beautiful. The sun coming up in the morning. We stayed in this location, which is in Monument Valley. So that was the view out of our veranda in the morning as the sun just came up. I just love this. I know it makes me want to go back. I just love when I'm out. We call this the outback. That's what we call it. I don't know what you guys call it in the USA.
The desert.
We call desert deer. Yeah, well, we call this the outback. But it's just beautiful. I love the sun, stars, and everything in this image. You can sort of see the road, which gives it. And there's even some little cars down here. There's some cars there too. So it gives you a sort of a scale of what's going on. So I just really wanted to show something different. It's just something different for me. Completely different than what I'd normally share. Like I said, I definitely don't classify myself as a landscape photographer, but
now what did you use? You use manual?
Yeah, always. Yeah, like I said, I'll always shoot manual. So this was completely shot manual. I think this was the Tamron lens, because I think I was reviewing the Tamron lens at the time. This was the 17 to 28. And it probably would have been somewhere. I can't remember the details actually of it, but it was the Tamron lens.
The Sunstar had to have been like an f/22-ish or something, like really stopped down.
Yeah, it had to be really stopped down to get that Sunstar, and that's the effect that I wanted, was that Sunstar coming up.
Beautiful.
But yeah, love it. So that's mine, Aaron. If you wanted to show yours.
Okay. Now I've showed a few. I've been showing a few non-model things in the last couple episodes, just because I've been into that. But I'm going to share this one here.
Yep. Let me bring it up.
Do you see it?
It's up. Yep.
So this is from the same shoot as the couple that I was showing you. Not the models with the rings, but with the violin and all that stuff. And I just wanted to show this, that this room was really cool and stuff. But I was on the outside shooting in, and I was shooting with at 0.9 f. Let me slow down. f/0.95 on the 50 millimeter equivalent Medicon 35 millimeter.
Oh, cool.
Fuji lens. I always get all that confused. But what happened was, because I was outside and I was open so much that the window, the blur that you see is the window, and it was too bright and she was too dark inside. So the photo didn't work, because you got this really bright, wood frame of the window that I'm shooting through that was really bright because I'm at 0.95, and inside, of course, it was too dark, so she was black. So what I did here was I increased the shutter speed to make the thing dark, and then I used a flash. Like the way you're looking at it is right to the right. The front of this room went, like alongside me to the right. So I just set up a flash. I think I set this one up outside. I can't remember now. I might have shot it through the actual window, or on the inside, bounce it off the wall that the window was at. That's how I did it. Because I didn't, the window light was amazing, and I like I said, I don't want to make my photos look flashy.
Yeah.
So I just basically brightened up the same direction as the window light by shooting from the inside into the window and just letting it bounce off the window and then come back. And I just I was on the outside using a Godox wireless or a trigger release, or whatever you call it. What do you call those? Wireless
wireless trigger.
Flash trigger, right? So I was able to dial the amount of light, even though I'm outside and the flash is inside. I didn't have to go back and forth, and I just kept increasing the light till it had the proper exposure. So that's how I got this shot. If I didn't have a flash, man, it wouldn't have been as dramatic, because I would have to expose for the interior because it was just way too dark. And then the window would have been really bright because it was outside here. So this shot wouldn't work. I'd have to either get closer to the window where you wouldn't see the window frame, or I would just have to. So that's why, even though I don't use flash a lot, I always bring a flash with me. Because if I would have said, we're just going to go natural light, I got 0.95 amount of light, I don't need any flash, well, in this case, it wouldn't have worked. So I always bring a flash, and there you go.
Beautiful. Lovely. I'll put that up first, actually. Nash said, try shooting a jumping spider without cropping. Jim also said, other cropping constraints. I'm a baseball team photographer for kids in baseball. Crop is determined by my position behind a cyclone fence. And I can understand that. Like I said, sports nearly always.
You're not moving,
you may have to do it. Yeah.
You can't move.
Rob said, best parking view from a parking lot anyway. I know that view is gorgeous the second you drive up in that parking spot. I love Ripe Images said,
from your room, you had a good view.
Yeah, we did. Well, that was shot from my room.
Oh, that was the room on the balcony.
Yeah. But the parking lot view is amazing as well.
Okay.
Ripe said, anywhere else in Australia, it's the desert. In Australia, it's the outback. Yeah, we call it outback. Yeah,
that's funny.
And that's about it. So we're at the end of the show. So, what have you got planned for the week? Anything, Aaron, coming up or not?
I do. I have a new YouTube channel. If you guys don't know, I gave up my old one because it got to whatever, and so I wanted to start a new channel that really dives more into the art of photography and history of photography. And it's not a stressful thing for me because I don't care about. I mean, I love when people come over, and I love the subscribers, and I love to talk to people. I mean, hello, I talk and I can't shut up sometimes. I love people, so if they come over, it's great. If they don't come over, it's not a big deal. It's like I'm not chasing numbers anymore. Like I started getting kind of like, oh, why is it? So got a new channel. It's Aaron J. Anderson. I actually changed it today. It's Aaron J. Anderson. My old one, I changed to Aaron. Yeah, because the old one, I wanted it to. I couldn't change my name or something. I forget how it went, but it's Aaron J. Anderson now. That's the new one. The old one is Aaron's video photo something. But anyways,
I'll have the link for that down below anyway. So
yeah, my new one.
Yep.
So in the next, and the videos are going to be a little slower because I'm not stressed about it. But I'm going to review this. It's too hard to explain here. But what this is called a zine, and basically, what photographers I've been listening to this guy. I can't remember his name. He's put this book together. There's two different classes of photography that he said, and it's absolutely everything he says, like, yeah, that's for sure. Hello. I just didn't know how to articulate it in any of my videos, and I was doing more gear. But there's two different types of photographers. There's the online community of YouTube photographers and Instagram photographers, and then there's, well, he says the real photographer, and I don't want to offend anybody here, but there's a whole class of photographers that don't know or even have YouTube channels. They're out there shooting for Vogue. They're out there doing long-term photography projects, and you probably have never heard of them, right? And there's these two things, and it's just so funny. maybe I'll do a video about it or link to this guy, whatever. But he put this thing together, and this, I'm going to do a review on it because this is like photography. This isn't long-term photography projects. I mean, some of these guys go for 10 years doing photography projects. That's like, I've never heard of such a thing, but it is a thing. And they go to places, they pick a subject, and they'll do long-term photography. And this is called a zine. This has been printed out at a website called Blurb, where you can get your own magazine. This is about the same size as this. This is a magazine I shot for bridal clothing line and stuff. But you can do a photography, get it printed out like this, and have your own printed work in this. I've got a portfolio in here of a bunch of stuff, but it's just everything. You could put a cohesive, like let's say you pick something and say, I'm going to do bridges. Go out and just take photos of bridges and maybe get information about certain bridges. And then you could put zine together like this and put a paragraph. I think this was free. He's actually, I'm going to do a link to this because why he did this and how he did it is kind of complicated to explain here. But you can go to blurb.com and you can get a magazine printed out like this for, I think it's $20. They're different card stocks and just like regular prints, glossy and non-glossy. But this is one of the cheaper ones, and it's absolutely amazing. And do a project. I might do a project here in Puerto Rico about a subject, but it's a documentary project. It takes time and stuff. But if you don't want to go that route, pick a subject like bridges. I'm just saying that out of nowhere, and take bridges. Find out when that bridge was made and a little history on the bridge, and you can make something that has a cohesive story behind it instead of just snapshots of stuff, which I like to do too. Oh, it's amazing. So that was long. Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's a good hobby.
Yeah. Check it out, and it really makes you as a photographer get better.
Just to finish up too, Michael was saying, not sure how long this is going to affect everyone's photography out there, but the officials are closing some businesses again in Los Angeles. Things are starting to go backwards again. Yeah, like I said, the same thing's happening here, Michael. It's certainly not over for everyone, that's for sure. So just be careful. And I said this last time too, be careful about what you purchase and things like that at this stage, because just don't think that this is all over. I would be trying to maintain your money as much as possible at the moment in case if things go backwards again. So just consider that. And that was why I mentioned that lens. Unless you can afford it, don't be going out buying $3,000 lenses. Also, Rob said, someone posted, I saw this in their Facebook group this morning, the Photography Videography School, about some serious discounts on the Sony A7 series cameras. I noticed that Sony were giving cash back a few $100s actually for some of the cameras out there, probably because something new is going to be coming out reasonably soon. We're hoping, so that could be what it was too. Ike missed the talk about Nikon as well, huh? Yeah, you missed it all, Ike.
He missed it because he was on his VR headset playing something.
I know, I loved it. What did he say? Yeah, my VR headset just died, so I picked up my phone and saw Osler was live. I love it.
That's too funny. We needed you earlier. We had some Nikon questions.
Yeah. So. And that's about it, guys. So stay tuned. I will have the live show, well, as long as there's things to talk about, on Friday. So I'll be back on the usual Friday, Thursday show for you guys. Apart from that, everyone, stay safe out there. And we'll see you in the next video. We'll be back again the same time next week.
Thanks, guys.
Catch you, everyone. Bye for now. Any questions, leave them down below.
Yes.
Now, about that A7S III, Aaron, have you got yours yet, or?
I did, but I don't do gear videos no more.
Yeah, I've got to decide if I want to really push it.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.